Hey, podcast fans. Paul Lucas from UniWatch here, and I want to tell you that this episode of Unified is brought to you, like literally brought to you, by Astroluxe Innovations. Astroluxe is our podcast host, and they also designed our website, unveiled.show, where we have our show notes, links, photos, and so on. When Chris and I started this podcast, the only thing we really knew about podcasting was that we wanted to start doing it, but we had no idea how to get started. Astroluxe Innovations got us set up and has been helping us each step of the way. So if you're looking for fast, reliable, and affordable podcast hosting that comes with a sharp-looking, forward-facing website, get in touch with Astroluxe Innovations at Astroluxe.io. That's Astroluxe with an E at the end, ASTROLUXE.io. They'll make the whole process easy and understandable and help your podcast stand out in the crowd. And make sure to let them know that you were referred to them by Unified.
Hello. This is the Unified Show. I'm Chris Creamer from SportsLogos.Net. With me, as always, Paul Lucas from UniWatch. Paul, how you doing?
I'm doing good, Chris. How are you?
I'm doing fine. Thank you so much for asking. And that theme music that just played, I love it. Don't you love it? It's very catchy with the guitar.
I like our theme music by Chuck Rios.
Who right.
Composed that just for us.
That's right. And originally it had a bit of a piano flourish that we had Chuck take out. But every time I hear the song, I always just sing the piano part in my head naturally as it goes on. Oh, boy, what a big week in uniforms, eh?
It has been. This is really the first week since we've been doing the show that a major level pro sports team has done a uniform unveiling. The Cincinnati Bengals, of course, unveiled their new uniform set this week. And I have to say I'm relieved because I have been dreading the idea that it might happen on a Wednesday because we record these things on Tuesdays and then the episodes go live on Thursday. And Wednesday is sort of the dead zone where if news happens, like we miss it. And I've been petrified that either the Bengals unveiling or some other big piece of uniform news would happen on a Wednesday. But the Bengals were very obliging. They unveiled on a Monday. And so we'll have a lot to say about that.
Thanks so much, Bengals. You must be fans of the show and you must have memorized our schedule without us telling you. We really appreciate it. So, of course, today we are going to tackle the Cincinnati Bengals. That's obviously the biggest news of the week. We're going to hit some other things. The NHL, there's now reports that they may be considering jersey ads starting in the 22-23 season. You know, we're going to be tackling that. Major League Baseball had yet another holiday cap leak. This time it was Armed Forces Day. And the WNBA and the Dallas Wings had a bit of a whoopsie when it came to their uniform reveal this past week, and they had to walk something back. So we will be tackling that as well. Before we get into the show, I did want to share a bit of a fun personal story that I had this week. And as many of our listeners know, we're back under lockdown here. My kids are doing virtual school starting this week. So it's a lot of running around for me, going from computer to computer, jumping from JK, junior kindergarten, to grade 2 to make sure the kids are doing what they're supposed to be doing. I go to check in on my son, who's in the 2nd grade. Okay, let's see if you're doing a good job in class. And what do I see? But he's sitting in front of the computer with SportsLogos.Net up on the screen. And he is tracing the Hartford Whalers logo.
You're starting him young. I like this.
That was kind of like a wow moment for me. First of all, it's weird to see something that I created using something I created. That's a bit of a, how does that even work? But then he did it on his own. And now he's got a bit of a Whalers obsession. You know, he set up a Whalers arena in our kitchen the other day with a light bright scoreboard. And he drew the center ice logo on a piece of paper and taped it to the middle of the floor. I don't know. I guess it's in his genes, but I just wanted to share that story. I thought that was amazing.
Have you broken the sad news to him that the Hartford Whalers no longer exist?
He's very aware. And that might be why he likes them, because they never lose. So yeah. He might have the sports fandom thing figured out.
Well, there's still a Hartford Whalers fan club in Connecticut, still ongoing. How many years is it now? Over 20 years, I think, since the Whalers moved to Carolina. But there's still a rabid fan group that holds out hope that they'll return, or likes to get angry at the Hurricanes when they wear the Whalers throwbacks. And so if they just wait a little longer, I'll be ready to join the fan club.
I was going to say we might need to inquire about that right away. He runs around the house singing "Brass Bonanza," the Whalers theme song. Like it's nuts. But I'm so proud of that. I'm doing a good job, I think, as a dad with that.
That's really good. I like that. I like that.
Thank you so much. But now on to probably the opposite of that story.
Yeah, a more depressing story.
Yeah, we go from the lifelike wonder and innocence of a child, remembering a team that relocated 24 years ago, to the National Hockey League, rumored to be implementing ads on the jerseys for the 22-23 season.
Yeah, and the floor is yours. This is more than a rumor. I mean, this was reported by Sports Business Journal, which is extremely reputable. Their reports of this type of thing, this type of development, have generally turned out to be accurate. They cited multiple unnamed sources, but they're not the kind of media outlet that just throws around rumors, or like if they said it means it's definitely in the discussion phase. They didn't say it's definitely happening for 22-23, but they say it is. It's in the discussion phase and that it's being seriously considered. I think both of us are opposed to uniform ads on any part of the uniform. The NHL, of course, has taken a number of steps in this direction just within the last 4 months. In December, they started having helmet ads, which was supposedly a one-year thing to recoup revenue lost during the pandemic. Then they announced in January, I believe, that their divisions for this season, their division names would have corporate advertised names like the Toyota Central Division or whatever. That also supposedly just for one season. Then in March, NHL Commissioner Gary Bettman announced that, in fact, the helmet ads probably weren't going to be just for one season and that they would be extended for at least one more season. And now comes the news that there may be ad patches on the jerseys. So it definitely seems like the NHL has taken a bunch of steps. If you sort of chart that timeline in just 4 months, from having no corporate presence on team branding and league branding, and now suddenly it looks like there could be a lot of it. What I found most surprising and really sort of upsetting about this is that the NHL has really been the league that has kept its jerseys, if not its helmets this season, but has kept its jerseys pretty pure. While other leagues use camouflage jerseys in game, have the pink or the blue promotions for Mother's Day, Father's Day, various holiday things, green for St. Patrick's Day, all these different things that we've seen in the other leagues. The NHL restricts all of that to pregame. There's never been, I believe, there's never been an NHL team that's worn camouflage in a game, only for pregame, or any of these other things. And it's fairly common for pregame. Same with like Pride Night, with the rainbow patch, all for pregame. And then they keep the game jerseys pretty pure. And similarly, while other leagues have had maker's marks either on the chest or on the sleeves, like in the NFL, the NHL has had it on the back, where it's less prominent. And so when you're looking at the front of an NHL jersey, you're really just seeing that team design, that team branding, and the beautiful crest. Because, of course, most hockey sweaters don't have letters unless you're the Rangers or a few others. Usually it's just a big design. And there's something really powerful and satisfying about that. And I'm finding myself really depressed that could be really compromised by the addition of ad patches.
Now, our good friend Todd Radom once told me there's no greater canvas than the hockey jersey, because it's just one big, you don't have to worry about numbers. You don't have to worry about a shorter cut like in basketball or baseball with the buttons. It's just, here's a big canvas for you, stick your logo on it front and center.
And it's an even bigger canvas because hockey is the one sport where the jerseys are designed to be worn untucked.
Right.
So it goes down below the waist level. And so it really is a big, open, beautiful canvas. And that's part of why the hockey sweater is such a special thing. And I've been on conference calls with Gary Bettman and heard him say he really reveres the sanctity of the sweater, of the NHL sweater. And that's why I've always been skeptical that they would ever go this route. And it's disappointing to hear that they may be.
It's just the way it is now, apparently, right? The NBA started it, and Major League Baseball has been considering it. And I feel like there's no turning back at this point. I was willing to tolerate the helmet ads even beyond this season, as long as they kept the sweaters clean. And now what they're doing helmet ads and the sweater, is that part of the plan? I quickly read
That
that
is
report.
apparently the plan. Yeah.
Yeah, that's why. That seems overkill to me, right? One or the other at least. Don't do both. Um, I'm thinking of minor league hockey leagues like the American Hockey League, where they have an ad patch right up here in the top
on the upper chest area,
yes.
similar to where the NBA has it, basically.
Right, and whereas in the NBA I find it's more tolerable, in the hockey I don't quite feel that it is, and that might just be because I'm so used to the sweater being so pure and clean and
you're a bigger NHL fan than
that might be it. So. Yeah. But like seeing the Toronto Marlies skate down the ice with a McDonald's patch on their jersey, it loses something, that special logo on the front of the jersey.
It does. And it really, I mean, the Marlies are a minor league team, and that says minor league in a way. Yes. Like it signifies as minor league when you have that ad patch there. It's something we've come to expect from the minor leagues, but not from a top level pro league.
Yeah. I mean, and nothing screams we're not a top level pro league like we need advertiser patches on our jerseys, right? Like TV revenue's not doing it for us. We can't pay the bills. Is that what they're saying?
Yeah, either that or it's just greed. And, either way, it's not a good look.
Right.
So again, this is potentially, according to the Sports Business Journal report, potentially for the 2022-23 season. So that would be not the season we're currently in the middle of, not next season, which starts, I think they're going to be back on the regular schedule, right? So they'll start around September or so for the 2021, but the season after that. So there's still a little bit of time, hockey fans, to enjoy the look of the NHL as it currently exists, but maybe not too much more time.
Yeah, and you Seattle Kraken fans, you get one full season.
No, that's a good point. The Kraken will have 1 year. Well, it's a good thing because they'll probably have some sort of inaugural season patch.
Right. Oh, and there's another discussion now.
They can get rid of that and replace it with like a MasterCard patch or something like
Starbucks at Seattle.
Oh, right. Good call. Yeah.
Oh, so what's next?
Speaking of leagues that do roll out camouflage and other sort of holiday promotions for on field, not just for pregame. I was able to get the scoop on this, that a European e-commerce site leaked 21 of the 30 Major League Baseball camouflage caps for Armed Forces Day. I've always taken a pretty dim view of camouflage in general as sports uniforms. Number one, it generally looks awful. It doesn't match with most teams' colors. Camouflage doesn't look good from a sports perspective. It's designed to blend in. It doesn't really fit. I'm still waiting for those uniforms that recognize and salute other types of heroes like teachers or during the pandemic grocery workers or whatever, but it's always just military, who of course do deserve certain respect, but they seem to be the only group that gets that from the sports world, which I find disappointing and distorted. And in the case of Major League Baseball, for people who don't know the story, for years they used camouflage caps and jerseys on Memorial Day, which is really inappropriate because Memorial Day is not a day to celebrate the military. It's a somber day of mourning for military personnel who have died in the line of service. So a black armband or even just a moment of silence would really be more appropriate than some sort of rah-rah USA kind of fist pumping thing, which the camouflage gear tends to promote. And so they did, when various people, myself included, wrote about that over and over, year after year, they finally stopped doing the Memorial Day camouflage, and to their credit, replaced it with caps with the poppy, which was great in 2019, I think. And of course, the poppy is more popular in Canada and in the British Commonwealth, other British Commonwealth countries than it is in America. But I really thought it was great. I never thought I'd see the day when an American sports league used the poppy, a flower, a symbol of peace, on a sports uniform. But I thought that was great. And then instead, they came up with a holiday that most Americans don't even know about, called Armed Forces Day, and decided to use the camouflage for that because it's in the same month as Memorial Day. And believe me, most, Chris, in Canada, I assume you had never heard of Armed Forces Day until Major League Baseball started saluting it. But trust me when I say most Americans have no idea either. And in fact, when I was promoting this leak of the caps, on social media, I had a lot of responses saying, "What holiday is that? Like, that's actually a day? I never even heard of that." And really, it's just a way for Major League Baseball to sell lifestyle gear. It's a way to move merchandise, and it seems like a pretty cynical move to me. If they had just done the Memorial Day with the poppy and leave it at that, I would have a lot more respect for their approach here.
So much for the subtle approach for Mother's Day, though.
Yeah, right. Because as we discussed last week, for Mother's Day, they basically used everybody's regular cap, the regular colors, and just turned the logo pink. Whereas these caps for Armed Forces Day are full on camouflage. Never mind that the Pirates and Reds already have camouflage alternate caps. Now they have additional camouflage caps just for this holiday, which is really ridiculous because those two clubs already have military appreciation alternate uniforms. There's no need for another version of it. It just underscores to me like the silliness of this. And I have to ask, what do you, as a Canadian and a Canadian fan of the Blue Jays, what do you think of them being included in this, where the Blue Jays are wearing the same camouflage pattern as all the other teams and being included in this promotion? And of course, the Jays are playing in America this year. They're not playing, but we know from past experience that they would have been part of this promotion anyway.
Yeah, and that's pretty much what I wrote down. It was like 2 years in the USA, but that wouldn't have mattered anyways. We're kind of used to it at this point, just sort of being shoved in with the US holidays. It's sort of our role in the world. we're like the US is a little brother, I guess. It doesn't make a lot of sense. Armed Forces Day is, you say it's not known in the USA, it's completely unheard of in Canada. I don't mind that they're celebrating this in the USA, the Blue Jays. If the entire league's doing it, the Jays play in the US anyways, why not, right? What really doesn't make sense is, in the past when they've played on Memorial Day in Canada, which is really just a random Monday in May, like Memorial Day, it's not like we're aware of the 4th of July. We're aware, your Thanksgiving's in November. When Memorial Day comes around, it's not like, hey, it's Memorial Day in the US. It's just, we don't realize it because we're more focused on Victoria Day, which is 1 week later. And I remember going to a Jays game, maybe 2007, 2008 on Memorial Day, and watching the players come out there. The Blue Jays were wearing white caps with red bills, and they had red visors, and they had like a maple leaf pattern on the J because it was during the Black Jays era. And they're wearing this with a black jersey. So it couldn't have been more, at the terrible combination. And just like listening to the people around me going, why are the Blue Jays wearing this white and red ridiculous cap? And going, oh, it's because it's Memorial Day. Memorial in the US, but we're not in, I know. But it kind of makes sense. American players, American League, we get it. We tolerate it. We understand why. It does nothing for the fans in the stands, though, in Toronto. And to be honest, it really makes no difference when the Blue Jays play on the road on the 4th of July and they make the Blue Jays wear their Canadian-themed Stars and Stripes cap, which they're supposed to wear on July 1st. Mm-hmm. And, that makes me feel kind of ridiculous watching my team in the US on their national holiday, and we're decked out in maple leaves and red and white, it doesn't make sense. So it goes both ways. It certainly seems a little more one-sided, but again, we're just sort of used to tolerating this sort of thing. It'll sell. Camouflage is very popular as a lifestyle thing up here.
Will people buy like a camouflage Blue Jays cap for a holiday they've never heard of? Or they don't care that it's for the holiday. They just care that it's a camouflage.
They just like the camo. And the camouflage is very popular to wear up in Canada, where, like anywhere else, you go beyond the cities and it's very rural and, a lot of hunting and things. Mm-hmm. So, Canadians love the camouflage. Not my thing, but, I see people around town here all the time wearing camo Jays gear and camo leaf stuff. It's good for sales, which is what they want. So
yeah. So then our third news item was a really unusual story. I thought that I think a lot of people missed because it broke like late last Friday and then got kind of buried in the weekend news cycle, which is that the WNBA's Dallas Wings, and we had just discussed their uniforms and the rest of the WNBA new uniform releases for their 25th season last week on our show. The Dallas Wings had to withdraw their uniform, their alternate rebel uniform, as they called it, because it was a tribute to a group called the WASPs, which is the Women's Air Force Service Patrol, which a group of women that basically test drove or test flew planes during the 1940s, during World War II, so that men would be free for combat duty. And which is a great story of women's empowerment and women's involvement in the war effort and all that, all very good. And they were based in Texas, not in Dallas proper, but close enough for the Dallas Wings to claim them as part of their local heritage. Just one problem, which is that the WASPs excluded Black women from their ranks. And not just that there didn't happen to be any Black women, but they actively excluded Black women. And there were a few people on social media who brought this to the team's attention, to the WNBA's attention, and to Nike's attention. And eventually they decided to pull the uniform. I was sort of astonished that 3 large corporate entities, the team, the league, and Nike, could somehow not be aware of this. And this aspect of the WASP is literally on their Wikipedia page and in lots of other places, but just as something as simple as their Wikipedia page makes it clear that they excluded Black women, that some women were turned away, others were told to stop their applications. And it's also set down in several books and blah, blah, blah. If you were doing the research on this, which Nike always brags about doing, how we deeply research the history and the heritage and the story so we can do storytelling and all this crap, like, how could you miss this? And obviously it was a particularly messy situation, given that the WNBA is about 70% Black athletes.
I think what's even more embarrassing about this is that the part of the jersey program that this was a part of, right? Like, look at what the New York Liberty uniform is in this exact same series. The Liberty's Rebel Edition uniform says equality right across the chest.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, the Dallas Wings are celebrating an organization which outright rejected Black women. And it's not like that's just the way it was at the time. Like, as far as I could tell in my quick research of this, is that other military organizations weren't doing this. Like, this was exclusive to the women Air Force service pilots. Obviously, this isn't something that should be celebrated. This is pretty embarrassing for WNBA, Nike, the Dallas Wings. I do wonder, though, does this now change the way that, say, Major League Baseball teams will approach pre-1947 throwback uniforms?
I wonder. And, in the NFL, it was in 2019, I believe, that the Chicago Bears debuted a throwback from like the early in the George Halas era, like an early throwback. And it was a throwback that Black players literally had not been able to wear because they were excluded from the NFL at that time. And so the Black Bears players at that, in 2019 would literally be the first Black players to wear this design. And the team acknowledged that and actually talked about it and did a video about it, and saying that, that nostalgia isn't all just like this hazy reminiscence of romantic, storytelling, myth making, blah, 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 that history is messy. History is painful. And I think certainly what you see with this WNBA situation is that when you try to reduce history to lifestyle branding, into some neat little quote unquote storytelling package, it can get messier still. And, it's a good reality check for all of us to remember that history isn't always as simple as the press release that comes out with the uniform.
I couldn't have said it any better myself.
Yeah. But I think you raise a great point about baseball and what will happen with throwbacks that predate Jackie Robinson. And certainly we're seeing more Negro Leagues throwbacks now. So that's a good thing to see. I think the Royals, of course, and the Tigers have a Negro Leagues throwback game coming up just next month in May.
Yeah, that's right. And you reported this, that Seattle is going to do one as well.
Yes, they were planning to do one last year, and that got wiped out by the pandemic. And so they're going to do it this year on June 19th, which is Juneteenth, which is a great day of Black freedom and Black emancipation. And so kudos to them for picking that particular day for it. It's Seattle Steelheads, really nice looking throwback.
It's unusual. Like, the Bears acknowledged this, the WNBA, eventually caught this, and just how did Major League Baseball, how have they escaped this non-realization that now you have African American players wearing uniforms pre-47 that they never wore before? I've never heard that brought up anywhere.
No, and to be fair to them, I've never brought it up either. When the Bears made a thing about it, again in 2019, and it was a real eye opener because I love throwbacks, I love old designs, I love how you've heard me say on this show that throwbacks are basically history lessons, but I have often treated that as more of an aesthetic or design history lesson rather than the bigger picture. And I mean, I remember as far back as the 90s, like the Red Sox wearing those throwbacks with like the lace up collar. In my mind right now, I'm picturing Nomar Garciaparra wearing that. That's like a 1912 design or something like that. Obviously, the black players on the Red Sox were the first black players ever to wear that uniform. But did it occur to me at the time? Well, I wasn't even writing about uniforms at the time. But a lot of throwback water has gone under the bridge, so to speak, without that issue being raised. And I think it's worth remembering that when we celebrate a team's history or a certain chapter in a sports history, which is part of what throwbacks do, that again, that history can be messy and it can be painful, and that we should not sanitize it, or we should be awake to all of it.
I think the Chicago Bears probably had the best approach to this, where they acknowledged it and they turned it into a teachable moment.
And speaking of teachable moments, Chris, do you have something to teach us about the good folks at Homefield Apparel?
I sure do, Paul. This episode of Unified is brought to you in part by Homefield Apparel. Are you bored with all the cookie cutter t-shirts for your favorite college sports team? Homefield Apparel, a premier brand out of Indianapolis, offers incredibly comfortable, officially licensed apparel with vintage college sports design, so you won't look like everyone else out there wearing the same Nike or Adidas t-shirt. Homefield combs through historic collections to find unique logos, mascots, and other graphics, and then uses those graphics to make thoughtful designs for schools as large as the University of Alabama and as small as a Division III school like Hope College. You can check them out now at homefieldapparel.com, where you will get 15% off your first order with the checkout code UNIFIED. That's homefieldapparel.com, checkout code UNIFIED for 15% off.
Now it's time for our main topic of the week. And some weeks we have to debate what it's going to be. This time it was really easy and obvious. The Cincinnati Bengals unveiled their new uniforms. We've known for a few months now that this was coming. And it's kind of exciting for us because it's the first major pro league full team redesign to take place in the unified era, as it were, the unified podcast era. It was kind of a low-key unveiling. Like, it was mainly through social media and the team's website. They did have a sort of press conference afterward, but it's sort of, I guess, what unveilings are now during the COVID era. No live event, obviously. And they kind of jumped the gun. It was supposed to happen at 9 a.m. on Monday. And I sort of glanced at their Twitter feed around 8:20 and like, boom, they were already posting photos. Caught me off guard. Chris, what did you think of the design, just in a general sense?
Well, I got to share how I found out about the uniforms too, because I was still lying in bed and I pull out my phone and I'm scrolling through, and like you, I expected 9 a.m. So I was talking to my NFL reporter, Andrew Lind. He was getting ready for the article, and there it is. I sent it to Andrew. Go. Wake up, Andrew. He's an hour behind. So teams, don't do that, please. I know it's not funny.
Well, I was wondering if they had information somewhere where it was about to leak.
Okay. Well, in that case,
where the photos were about to leak, and they decided they want to get ahead of it. And of course, it already had leaked back in March, and we'll get to that. Let's go element by element. And sure. So obviously the most important element of any football uniform is the helmet. Mm-hmm. And the Bengals have arguably the most distinctive helmet in the NFL. It's somewhat polarizing. Some people think it's distinctively good, and others, myself included, think it's distinctively bad. And they had announced beforehand, we already knew this, that they would not be changing the helmet, which has been the same now since 1981. So 40 years, which is really one of the longest runs of an unchanged NFL helmet. What's your feeling about that? Did you feel that it was the right move to stick with the tiger striped helmet, or do you wish they had gone with some other kind of design?
I like this, Paul, because I think it's the first time we've disagreed on something. Because I'm polarized on the complete opposite end that you are. I love the tiger striped helmet. To me, there's no better helmet in the NFL than this tiger striped helmet. Like, it conveys the identity of the team so perfectly. It's like a more modern day LA Rams or Philadelphia Eagles. And the alternative that I always hear about is that arched Bengals word mark that goes on the side of the helmet, which I never quite understood the appeal in that. To
No,
me,
I don't either, frankly.
okay, good.
There are other options. I have to say, I understand the thinking and why people like the tiger striped helmet. For me, and you mentioned the Rams, for me, it doesn't have that sort of crisp dynamic feel of the ram horns or the Viking horns that that the Vikings have, or the Eagles wings. To me, it has always looked like this sort of amorphous amoeboid blob, like just this swirl of a blob, and that it looks kind of clown-like in that way. It doesn't look crisp. And I get, tiger stripes, and it's not just slapping a logo on each side. And so I get the creative aspect, in that it uses the helmet as more of a canvas, instead of just as like a billboard for two logos on each side. I get all of that. It just doesn't work. It has never worked for me. And I've interviewed the guy who designed it, Bruce Claypool, really interesting guy, nice guy, worked for NFL Properties at the time, and wasn't even a football fan, and came up with the idea, and just as a freelance graphic designer. But it has never really worked for me. But my impression from years of interacting with Bengals fans is that fans of the team do like it, and it is certainly the team's visual signature, or it has become that over the years. And I understand why they've stuck with it in that regard. And probably, I would think, we'll never change it now. Like if they didn't do it now, I don't think they're ever going to change it.
Well, it's certainly the most iconic part of their uniform, and
Yeah.
you stick with it this long, where you say it's been 40 years. Well, now like you said, it should be stuck around forever. Traditions have to start somewhere.
Yeah.
And this one, just because it started in 1980 instead of 1930, doesn't make it any less of a tradition.
No,
right?
no, fair enough. And they've kept it while changing other aspects of the uniform. Speaking of which, they've changed their jerseys, the new jerseys. Most notably, they've gotten rid of the white side panels that were on their black primary jersey and the orange alternate jersey. And these were the white stripes that went down the sides, that was sort of like fashionable or in vogue. It was a trend. Let's say it was a trend, like in the 90s and the early aughts. And I gotta say, I never understood that trend. It never made sense to me. I never understood what it added, to a uniform, even when it was the current thing, the trendy thing. And of course, it looked even worse as the Bengals kept wearing it all the way through last year. And so, in my opinion, like, getting rid of that is the very definition of addition by subtraction, like getting rid of the side panels. I assume you agree on that one.
Well, yeah, of course I agree on that part, because it was such an unnecessary addition to what was otherwise a nice Bengals uniform. It just cluttered it up. Why are you doing it? And like you say, it was very trendy. For some reason, this stuck around with the Bengals. We're not entirely sure why. And I will be honest, I didn't notice how bad the side panel looked on the Bengals uniform until I saw the new uniform without the side panel. And
and you did like a little before and after comparison.
yeah. So like, going into this redesign, I was thinking, well, why are they changing their uniforms? They're really not that bad. Until I saw the new uniform side by side with the old uniform, and I thought, okay, they were that bad. They weren't actually that good. What am I talking about? So like you say, addition by subtraction. I'm so glad they got rid of the side panel. Speaking of reducing panels, right? They also did this to the pants, where
right. So they had the stripe panels that went down the side of the pants, the side of the thighs, and at least in the Nike, this was sort of an unheralded change when Nike took over the NFL in 2012. The teams that wore this pant template, and the Broncos are really the other team that have it. They don't have stripes on their pant panel, but it is the exact same sort of tapered curve to a point panel on the side of the pants. In the Reebok era, it just came to a point, and when Nike took over in 2012, that point wrapped around further to the front of the pant leg, like just above the knee. And if that panel happens to have stripes on it, like the Bengals one did, it looked almost like a tail, like a tiger's tail, which I guess would be okay, except tails don't come around on the pants, and you don't have two tails, one on each leg. And
hey, speak for yourself, Paul.
It really struck me as the most overdone part of the old uniform. It was just way too much, and they have scaled it back. So they still have the stripes going down the sides of the pants, but that panel with the stripes, it's like a stretch panel, doesn't wrap around to the front anymore, and it's mostly straight, and it comes to a sort of like a blunt edge taper at the base. So that to me was another case of addition by subtraction, that they scaled that back a bit, and it does look better.
Yeah, and I mean, there's a reason why they're called side stripes, right? Like they're not supposed to come around to the front. It litters what the front of the jersey is supposed to be. Those stripes are supposed to follow the side of the leg. And if you do have a side panel, which they don't anymore, it's supposed to line up with the side of the jersey.
Right.
Yeah, that's the whole point of it. And really unnecessary, just another way that they're able to clean this design, declutter it. And speaking of cleaning and decluttering, probably my favorite part of this whole redesign was what they did to the white jersey and get rid of that big shoulder striping that they had that went across the entire front of the uniform that wrapped around.
Sort of a shoulder yoke. Yeah.
Yeah.
And on the back, like the nameplate on the back of the jersey was also in orange. I have to admit, and I know I'm in the minority on this, I liked that. I kind of liked the contrast of the orange, and I sort of miss it. But yes, they cleaned that up, so it is a more simplified white design. Another thing they changed, and for people watching on video, you can see behind Chris, he has an Ocho Cinco jersey, an 85 jersey. They have changed the number font. And so it's similar to the font you see hanging behind Chris, the old font that they had, but that one had a block shadow on it. And what they have now, they've just tweaked that font a little. It's still a very rounded number font. And now you have no block shadow, and it's rounded, and it's a team that wears black and orange. And it looks a lot to me like the Bears. And of course, the Bears have a dark navy, not black, but it presents often as black on TV and in photos, and it's close enough. I'm a little surprised, and to me, I think this was a misstep. I think that block shadow that they had on the old numbers was enough to make it distinctive and different from the Bears font. And there was a lot of talk about this when the leaks of these Bengals jerseys began surfacing in early March, and people were saying that looks like a Bears jersey, just with tiger stripes on it, and I think it kind of does. I think that was a real to me, that doesn't work as much. It's the Bears own that kind of number font so much in the NFL. They've had it going back to the 40s. You can look at like 40s photos of the Bears and see that. And even with leatherhead helmets and, without a logo on the helmet, that's the Bears. And so when I see this number font that they have now, which is not exactly the same as the Bears, but very close and in a similar color scheme, it feels a little borrowed. It doesn't feel, and in sports branding, you really want to own your look. And I feel like what they've done with this number font now, it feels borrowed, not owned.
There's really no reason why the Bengals couldn't come up with their own number font here, right? Like, it's not like designing a custom font is some new novel thing that teams aren't doing. It's just common practice at this point. Why are the Bengals using this font? Have they even said why? Is it just because
Nike
they like
designed it for them, as they do for many teams? It's it supposedly, like the angle of the tips of some of the numerals, suggest motion like a tiger strike, or it's angled and comes to a point like a tiger's claw, and all this nonsense that Nike likes to talk about. But really, it just looks a lot like the Bears font, frankly. And it's not different. Again, it's not that different from what they have been wearing, except what they had been wearing had that shadow added to it, and that gave it depth. And that's something that the Bears numbers don't have. And that was enough for me to differentiate. I never really even thought that it was similar to the Bears before. But now, when I see it now, to me, that was a real mistake.
Yeah, I mean, if you're going to remove you call the block shadow, that's what it's called?
Yeah, well, okay. Yeah, we can get into the difference between a drop shadow and a block shadow.
But I'm glad they removed the block shadow. But if they're going to do that, change the font. I think the block shadow, again, another unnecessary thing that just adds a little bit of clutter to it. But as you say, they should have noticed that, hey, we wear orange, we have the Bears font. People are going to think we look like the Bears. Change the font, right? Yeah. Like, is this isn't some legendary Bengals font that is rooted in their team's history that they took to the Super Bowl with them. They went to the Super Bowl once, right? Back in the 80s. Twice. Okay. So borrow from that design.
Right. And really at least what I hear from Bengals fans, by far their most popular uniform over the last few years has been the Color Rush uniform, which had block numbers. had block number, like why? And I realized like teams, we don't want to wear block numbers like everybody else. We want to be distinctive. Design us a custom typeface. Blah blah blah. But apparently, from what I hear, and I interact with a lot of fans, people loved that uniform, and so I thought that's where they were going to go. Frankly, was to have a block number font. Now numbers appear from most football teams, not just on the front and back, but also on the shoulders or the sleeves, but not for this new Bengals set. They are the latest in what I think we have to say is now like a verifiable trend of NFL teams not having what are called TV numbers, which are the smaller auxiliary numbers on the shoulder or the sleeve. And we saw this last year when the Rams, for at least one of their jerseys, and the Chargers, and help me out here, Chris, who am I leaving out?
The Patriots.
The Patriots. Thank you. That's who it was. I was about to consult my notes. All those teams released new uniforms last season without TV numbers. And there were also, we should say that not every new uniform set last year didn't have TV numbers. Like the Falcons, they have them, and the Browns and the Bucks have them, although those were sort of retro styled, so you'd expect them to have them. I'm rambling here, but clearly it is a thing now that you don't have to have TV numbers anymore. And that, like, both from a rules standpoint, because they used to be required, and the NFL has never quite officially announced that they're not required anymore, but also that Nike and the teams are deciding, yeah, we don't need to do this anymore. Like that's like an outdated look. The new modern contemporary way is to go without them. I don't have a problem with that per se. It takes a little getting used to, that it just sort of feels not as football-y somehow.
Does it feel incomplete?
A little. Is that how it feels to you?
Yeah, it feels a little incomplete. I mean, it doesn't bother me that much, but it feels like something's supposed to be there, right? And are they putting anything there to replace it, or is it just empty real estate? Future
of many teams, barely have sleeves anymore, right? And have removed sleeve stripes or so. The teams that still do have TV numbers, most of the teams have moved it from the sleeve to the shoulders, because the whole idea of a football jersey with sleeves is, unless you're a quarterback or a kicker, is almost like gone by the wayside now. So there's less real estate to work with.
You were mentioning me before the show that the Bengals were actually the last team to add TV numbers to their uniform.
That's right. The Bengals, they came into existence in the late 60s and went through the 70s without TV numbers. They were the last NFL team to add them in 1980. As part of their inaugural, they were wearing more or less the same uniforms they had started with. They added the TV numbers for 1 year, and then they redesigned, had the big makeover with the tiger striped helmet and added all the striping, and had TV numbers for that as well. So in those days, they were sort of trend buckers. They were like the last ones to get on board, and now they're trend hoppers. They're doing what everyone else is doing, or you could say that they're returning to their roots of not having TV numbers. This is probably the longest discussion of TV numbers that's ever happened.
I hope so. Let's get Guinness on the line. They can verify that for us. So all you Bengals fans who really missed the throwback look with the arched Bengals, you're not getting that on the helmet, but hey, you're losing the TV numbers.
Yeah. So that's your retro throwback.
That's right.
Both for the Bengals, for most teams, it's just modern and contemporary. For the Bengals, it's both modern and contemporary and a return to their roots. So that's,
exactly. Now, what do you think about this was a very popular uniform, at least I saw on Twitter from Bengals fans, and that is the use of the color rush style for the road white. A lot of Bengals fans love this, but I miss the lack of orange on the striping on the sleeves. How do you feel about that?
Yeah, that their primary white jersey will now just be solid white, essentially, except for the numbers and a few stripes. I feel like it's not orange enough. That's why I liked that orange yoke we were just talking about. I always kind of like that splash of orange. So I like when they wear this white jersey, I kind of hope they wear it with the black pants, which has the orange striping at least, instead of going white on white. But we'll see. I honestly, I never really understood why the color rush white over white was so popular. To me, it was, all right, it's white. It's a lot of white. Yeah. It never wowed me, but it is, I know from talking to a lot of Bengals fans, very, very popular. One thing we didn't see, and we were wondering, and I remember you were speculating that if the NFL lifted the one helmet rule, which we did a whole episode about, I thought they'd make a big splashy announcement. You thought that there'd be no announcement, that some team would just come out with a second helmet maybe even a third helmet. And that's how we'd learn about it. And we were speculating whether that might be the case with the Bengals because their white color rush uniform was popular. And I'm sure they would have loved to have a black and white or orange and white striped helmet to go with it. And of course, they haven't been able to under the current rules. And so that was really, for me, like the biggest drum roll, so to speak, about this uniform unveiling. Was there going to be a second helmet, a white striped helmet? And there wasn't, and there was no mention of it. And so for now, at least, it's still the one helmet rule is still there. We're waiting to see what the Cleveland Browns will do, because they're going to have their 75th anniversary throwback, which is supposedly going to be unveiled any day now, right? Like sometime between now and the draft, which is more or less any day now. And if it's historically accurate, that would have a white helmet. Mm-hmm. And so, but given what we've just seen with the Bengals, it sounds like they might not be able to do that.
I'm still holding out hope, Paul. I think it's still coming. I mean, we heard too much noise, and you've been in this industry long enough to know that where there's this much noise, there's usually something coming with it, right?
Mm-hmm. Like, is that the Universe's version of where there's smoke, there's fire?
Sure. Yeah. I think that's the idiom I was going with. And I halfway through, I'm like, wait a second, you didn't do the smoke, there's fire. I'm pretty sure it's still going to come. I think the Bengals are just holding off and they're waiting, because that white uniform does not make any sense with a orange and black helmet. Mm-hmm. It doesn't. They made pants that match them. The pants are black and white. Mm-hmm. They don't have the orange and the stripes there. Right. There's no orange and the stripes on the sleeve. And then you have this bright orange helmet on top of it all. They got to be doing a black and white helmet, right?
You'd think. Well, yeah. We'll find out. The NFL is supposedly ruling or voting rather. The owners are voting on rule changes. I think next week. I think it's next week. That uni number designation change that we talked about last week on the show, where they're going to expand the number ranges that certain positions are allowed to wear. That's going to be voted on. It's expected to pass. And some other things like, having a sky booth official and things like that. A lot of rule change proposals. And I have not heard anything about the one shell rule being on the ballot. And I've asked a few people who are covering the meetings, like, have you heard anything? And they said, I'm not sure this is the place where that gets addressed. But this is exactly the time when the Eagles tried to get it changed, like at that same set of meetings back in 2017, when they tried to get the helmet rule changed. So we'll see. Maybe there'll be some news on that front next week. We'll see. Now, another thing that I don't think many people were thinking about, and I forgot about it myself until I checked some of my own notes, is that we're expected to see a new jersey tailoring template from Nike this coming season, at least for a few teams. I know for sure for the Broncos, or at least that's what their equipment manager has told me. And I was wondering if the Bengals might be showcasing that would we see a new tailoring template? And no, so that the new uniforms do not have the new template. So that means either the Bengals are not one of the teams upgrading this season, or just that they're not ready to show that off yet.
Or the change is happening next year, or they're rolling it out slowly, or, who knows, right?
Yeah. Well, these things often happen a few teams at a time. Right?
Yeah.
There's still a couple of teams in the league wearing the fly wire collar, right? So, so it's not always like a league wide thing. And so just because it is coming, or even if it is coming, it doesn't necessarily mean that it includes the Bengals.
So I guess we'll have to wait till we see the Browns.
Yeah. And that's the other thing, is that the leak in March that included these Bengals jerseys turned out to be accurate. Like what we saw in the March leak is exactly what we saw in this week's unveiling. And that means the other teams that we saw as part of that same leak, which were the Browns throwback jersey and a 49ers throwback jersey, there's now more presumptive legitimacy for those designs, because the Bengals designs turned out to be right. And I think that means we can pretty well conclude that the Browns and Niners designs will also be right.
Mm-hmm. Did you mention that they all came from the same person? Or the same?
Yeah, they were all the same source. It was a guy on eBay, wasn't it?
Yeah. So, I mean, it's got to be it, right? So the Browns and the 49ers, both throwback uniforms.
Right.
Remind me, was the 49ers one a white throwback uniform?
No, it's a red version of the white one they've been wearing. They've been wearing the white one, and it's the red version of that, which is the same throwback they wore in 1994, which turned out to be their Super Bowl season. And so it's the throwback of the throwback.
which is another one that could use a second shell, right? Because didn't they wear the silver helmets with that uniform?
No.
Okay.
Well, originally,
originally.
way back in the day, but not in '94 when they wore it as a first time throwback.
Yes.
Yeah, there's a weird sort of time warp effect here, where like a wormhole is going to open, and how many times can you throw back to the same?
you got to throw all the way.
The original version of that uniform did in fact have silver helmets. That's true.
That's we've thrown back to '94 enough. Let's throw back to the actual throw. I'd love to see them wear that silver helmet. At least
that would be great.
That would be cool. But overall, what do you think about this new Bengals uniform?
Honestly, but there are some obvious upgrades, like getting rid of the side panels and scaling back the pants striping. Those are obvious pluses. Number font to me is an obvious minus. Getting rid of the orange on the white jersey seems to me to be a minus. And for me, leaving the helmet by itself, unchanged is a minus, because I'm not a fan of the helmet. So to me, it feels sort of like a lateral move. There's like a couple of steps forward, couple of steps back. It feels kind of like a push to me. Like they were obviously one of the worst dressed teams in the league, in part because of the side panels and the pants striping. I'd say they're still in the lower echelon. Have they moved up a few slots? Yeah. Like, are they obviously better looking than the Cardinals now? Yeah. Before it was like neck and neck, but now they're definitely better. But to me, they're still not one of the better looking teams in the league. And a big part of that for me is because I don't like the helmet. So, and I realize that, again, that's a polarizing thing. So that reasonable people can disagree on that. What do you think overall?
I think overall it's an upgrade. To me, the two minuses are the number font and the lack of orange on the sleeves of the white jersey. I don't get the black and white thing. I know Bengals fans love it. I just don't. I don't understand it. So, but you like it. It's your team. That's good. You're happy. Mm-hmm. And I did a Twitter poll on my Twitter account there, and 81% of people said they liked it. So that's pretty decisive.
We run our country based on Twitter polls, so that's good enough for me.
It's a very scientific poll.
Yeah.
So I guess +1 for me and neutral for Paul. So overall +1.
A slight upgrade. I see it as a slight upgrade. It doesn't really, to me, it doesn't move the needle that much. Like, it doesn't really change the bigger problems they have. That it's like they still have some aesthetic issues.
Right. But overall, I think an upgrade. All right, Paul. Well, we might not agree whether this was a positive or negative for the Bengals, but what we can agree on what's a positive is what you have to say about Streaker Sports.
Definitely a positive, Chris. People, if you're looking for really unique sports apparel, check out our friends at Streaker Sports. They've dug deep into their archives and have brought back some incredible defunct team logos, and they've even created entire defunct league collections. Most recently, they've launched new t-shirt designs from the Continental Basketball League and the North American Hockey League. That's the 1970s league that inspired the movie Slapshot. Every couple of weeks, they release more teams and leagues. So if you're a fan of retro style and sports history, they're a fun brand to follow. They also have apparel collections celebrating sports culture, including a licensed Miracle on Ice collection and apparel from movies like Caddyshack. They even have an exclusive apparel license with wiffle ball. Check them out at streakersports.com and get 20% off with the checkout code UNIFIED. Again, that's streakersports.com and use the checkout code UNIFIED for 20% off.
Hey, Paul. Guess what time it is? Guess what time it is?
Is it time for the question of the week?
It's time for question of the week. And I think
I could tell it was that time because you have brought out your old St. Louis Cardinals football helmet. For the people who aren't watching on video, Chris has an upside down Cardinals football helmet. And what is inside that helmet, Chris?
Little teeny tiny pieces of paper. But on those pieces of paper are questions submitted to us from our loyal listeners and viewers. And I was just thinking we need a theme song for question of the week.
Ooh, little intro. Yeah.
Some sort of fanfare, perhaps.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah. Like a brass bonanza kind of thing. Yeah.
Yes.
Not literally, Brett, but something like that. Yeah.
Second brass bonanza reference this week.
You have dug elbow deep into the helmet and have pulled out
this question. Here we go. It's kind of timely.
Okay.
Somewhat. This comes from Joe Werner at jwerner74_. Joe, Joe asks what we think about color rush jerseys being paired with pants of contrasting colors to make a new alternate uniform. Joe doesn't care for the overall color rush look because he doesn't like mono unis, but some of the jerseys themselves look nice. Overall, I think Joe's wondering if we take a color rush jersey and pair it with actual colored pants that don't necessarily match the color of the jersey, does that make an interesting new alternate uniform combination for a team?
It could. There's certainly a lot of examples out there, especially if you pair it with white pants or black pants, which go, with most other colors. So if you have white or black pants already in your wardrobe, I think it could work. And I think Joe is right. Joe has hit upon something, which is that a lot of the color rush jerseys are pretty good, or maybe not a lot, but some of them are pretty good. And you could do something with them besides having what he called mono jersey, a monochromatic, having the same color jersey and pants. Like Joe, I'm not a big fan of that look for the NFL. It does not feel NFL-ish to me. It feels collegiate or even arena-ish.
Yeah.
I've never really liked that monochromatic look. It makes the players look like they're wearing a bodysuit, which I think is actually the idea. It's supposed to look more superhero-y, like they're wearing a unitard or something like that, a unitard, as it were. But I do think there are some of the designs are salvageable as alternate jerseys that could be paired with the team's regular pants. Yeah, so I think there's some potential there.
I think about like the Buffalo Bills, right? Like a red jersey that seems plausible for them, but not with red pants.
With their white pants or something like that. Yeah.
Or think about the last ever home game in the history of the St. Louis Rams, where they wore that all yellow jersey and pants. The yellow jersey itself with white pants or blue pants might have looked okay. Yep. Instead, all yellow head to toe kind of looked a little ridiculous.
In fact, I think that's what the Rams, they wore something like that in the 1994 throwback program. They wore a yellow jersey with white pants, I think. During that 75th anniversary NFL program where all the teams wore throwbacks. I think the Rams had something like that. So yeah, I think there's some potential there, although it's sort of when you invite teams to start mixing and matching, sometimes that way madness lies, as they say, but it could work. I mean, imagine if you start doing that and you lift the one helmet rule. So now you're mixing and matching not just jerseys and pants, but you're mixing and matching jerseys and helmets and pants. And it starts looking like color forms out there, right? Mm-hmm. Isn't that the kid's toy with like the little plastic peel off, stick on, where you can peel off this hairstyle and this sweater and these slacks or whatever, and you just sort of mix and match. And I feel like that could be where the NFL is heading if they start taking Joe's suggestion. But I do think it could work for some teams for sure.
It's color forms from this century. I've never heard of it.
Oh, really? Really? It was definitely when I was growing up in the 70s. Okay. Kids had color forms.
I didn't know you guys had color back then. It was all black and white.
The whole world was black and white.
That's right.
It's true. I can sort of hear one of the color forms commercials going and with a little tagline. It's color forms fun.
I want to hear the jingle. Let's go. Come on.
I can't remember the whole jingle. We'll find, folks, we will embed a YouTube color forms commercial in the show notes for this episode. Speaking of which, have we, I believe we may have once again come to the end of an episode.
We have. And once again, we have saved the universe from all troubles. Yes.
Well, I don't know. There's a lot of troubles this week between the NHL ads and some of the other things. Yeah, I don't know if we've saved it, but we've certainly documented a lot of troubles.
And one thing, although we might have destroyed the universe inadvertently when you talked about mixing and matching secondary helmets with color rush jerseys and alternate pants, and now teams can have 36 or 40 uniform combinations in the NFL. So,
yeah, fortunately, there's only 17 games in a season. So,
oh boy, what have we done?
Yeah,
Paul, please read us out this week.
I will take us out by saying that Unified is a joint production of UniWatch and SportsLogos.Net. Our producer editor is Chris Fratterigo. We are so grateful to him for all the help he gives us every week. Show notes for this episode are available at our website, unified.show. You can follow us on Twitter at UnifiedCast, where you can also learn about the t-shirts and stickers we have for sale. The Unified logo is by Brian Gundel. Our theme music is by Chuck Rios. If you're listening to us on audio, you can also see video versions of our episodes at youtube.com/sportslogos. The animation at the start of our videos is by Michael Princep. To submit a question for our Question of the Week segment, you can get your slip of paper in Chris's Cardinals helmet, or to inquire about advertising or anything else, email us at info@unified.show. If you like our show, please leave us a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts or wherever you get our podcasts. That's it for this episode. Stay well, and we will see you next week.
Bye-bye.
Bye. This is your bread and butter. This is like,
yeah, I know, but I like to come on.
This is our first week with like a big uniform reveal, like since we've been doing the podcast.
You're right.
So, well, unless you count like the Red Sox or something.
I don't.
Okay, yeah. Hold on. Like, come on. This is our bread and butter.
Hold on, Paul. Get psyched up.
Oh. Who's got this?
I got this.
You got this.
I know what I'm doing. I love this pump up session.
Yeah.